I'm Fabian van Sluijs. I'm the founder and creative director of Creative Coding Utrecht. And we're a platform for digital creativity, and we stimulate creative coding. And we do this through a variety of activities. Basically, we have 3 pillars. The first is Make, under which we organize workshops, meetups, and is focused on makers, professionals. The second one is Experience. This is where we present basically those practices to a broad audience. And I will give you an example of such a project in a bit. And basically, it's meant to showcase these new forms of digital creativity, bring that to new audiences, and we often do that in collaboration with partners. And the third strand is Learn, and it's all about education. Of course, creative coding is a practice where education and pedagogies are central because it's coming from an open source community. So it's all about sharing practices and learning each other. So that's one of the key ideologies that is also present as part of our organization. I'll showcase Gardening Amelisweert. It's a teaser. So gardening is a project where basically all these strands come together, because it's a project that takes place at Amelisweert, and it's a project that is about how nature and technology are intertwined, and how within the creative industry, or say digital culture, a lot of artists and designers, for them, nature and ecology are really important topics in their work. But how can you, often these terms are, there's a lot of slang or jargon, I don't know what the right word for it is. There are a lot of complex terminology, and people feel, well, the general audience doesn't really feel connected to these topics. It's big topics, climate change, like how can you relate to that? So what we did is organizing this exhibition at a space where actually the friction of the climate change or how we as humans can get a better relationship to the planet is taking place. Because Amelisweert is an area where already since the 80s there's this friction that the government wants to they put down the highway there, but they had to cut down a forest. And even now, 40 years later, there's still this big discussion about that they want to broaden up the highway because they expect that the city is going to grow. So so there are still a lot of activists. And this exhibition takes place in a forest where a lot of people, all layers from society, visit to recreate or to visit this old mansion where this exhibition takes place. So that's basically also our strategy to showcase these kind of works in a situation where it's relevant and where you meet new audiences and where you can also have this tangible political tension that is happening there. And we commissioned 4 new artworks to be made there. And one of which is a work by Cream on Chrome. And hoeveel minuten heb ik nog? Maybe I can briefly showcase this as well. Ja, precies. So this is a design duo called Cream on Chrome. I asked them to make an installation that revisits this court case that was back in the 80s. The environmentalist took action against the construction of the highway, and it was really man against the government, but there was no voice to the forest at all. So I invited them to make an installation that would give voice to like the non-human elements.
Multiple non-human actors who were involved in this discussion, or not involved enough into this discussion, and turned them into video testimonies. There are 5 objects which represent the actor, this environment. They contain one of these objects and place them in the texture. And you can see a testimony. So the room where we're showing our work is, of course, amazing. It's old tapestry and this old depiction of what the thought was beautiful nature. And in that scenery, that's where we have this sort of forum or court hearing, where they all voice their concerns and what they're thinking about right now regarding the space and how they're sharing it together. So we also have traffic, well, this traffic one in this debate, so just human issues, all this human culture and recreation one. And of course, the trees are always used as arguments. So it's really about how they make use of the space and how they experience space. We also try to interpret the water in a sort of a walk film and try to use the material that is used on the road, or use the bark itself to give it a presence, to let the material speak by itself. So for others, we used a lot of acrylic sheets actually in order to get more shape, right, and the expression. So that's more an artistic interpretation. Yeah, so we came here a few times to look at how the ecosystem works in Almeida Vizentin and how these different things come together and interact. And it was especially striking to see how these lanes, these massive, beautiful lanes with this outlook, are just so meticulously crafted. And so you have this thing of, is this in our culture, is this nature, is this human influence, or is this really wild? Yeah, that's quite fascinating to see.
So these are very raw, not finished edits at all, but it gives you a little bit of an idea of what this project is about, and also the artists with whom I work, I often have like a long-standing relationship with them, because Cream on Chrome, I was advising them on their talent development grant that they got from the Creative Industry Fund. So they asked me to give them advice, and then out of that collaboration, there came this opportunity to commission new works, and then I could give them this opportunity to make a new work. So it's interesting that, all these lines are intertwining again, so it's, Thanks.
Good. Nice. Hi, I would like to talk about my graduation work. It's called Agua Mole Pedra Dura. What is that? So, Agua Mole Pedra Dura, tanto bate até que fura. That's a popular expression in Brazil, which means kind of water dripping day by day, wears the hardest rock away. I wanted to use metaphors, visual metaphors, and interaction metaphors to raise questions or awareness about topics involving politics and democracy. The initial idea was that sometimes politicians might come as prefabricated molds to be filled up. And so I started with these masks, these sculptures, which are all the same, basically. And I wanted to represent politicians with them. The idea is that they come prefabricated, and then we project on these politicians the images, aspirations, wishes that we want. And they are more than happy to assume this image, this role, and take that forward as if it is them. This is the work as it's exhibited now. It's an array with it was an array of 50 masks, and every hour one mask drops from the installation. You have a little interface where you can select a politician and vote. These are all real people, real politicians from Brazilian Congress, or they were in Brazilian Congress at some point. And what I want to promote here is the idea of choice, the idea of voting, and the idea that we as part of this, we as citizens, we as part of the population can influence and can direct the system, the way the system develops. So you can select one of the politicians, you can vote for them, and every hour the politician with the least amount of votes is dropped from the structure. And the statues are then laying on the floor, broken, which I want, and which is something I'm going to leave until the end of the exhibition. It's a self-destroying installation. And at the end, the whole structure is empty, and you only see the aftermath of this process, of the democratic social process. The faces are all scraped from the Congress website, and I put them through an artificial intelligence model to be able to modify their expressions. So they're also reacting to the votes, getting sad or happy based on how people are voting. And yeah, that's done through AI. So I use their natural neutral face as a standard, and I can manipulate the expressions by going more negative or happy. I think this is the best angle of the work. You see all of them lined up in profile, and you also see the relief of the faces. Yeah, an interesting aspect of the work is how these are all Brazilian politicians. So for some Brazilian person who would come here and visit, they would be like, oh, that's Eduardo Bolsonaro. He is a horrible person. That's Jandira Fegali. She's maybe better. She has more conscious choices. But for the Dutch audience that we have here, or the more international audience, it's hard for them to relate to these faces, and they're kind of forced to choose a face based on their impression, their affinity with this face, like their yeah, how much they relate to this face. Yeah. And it's been we're now in the second day of the exhibition, and I think already 10 masks have fallen. Yeah, this is kind of where it's going towards. And this is my work, Água Mole Pedra Dura. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you both for your presentations. Fabian, my first question is for you. Are you still coding while being creative coding? Do you find time for that?
Yeah, it's a... Well, actually, I am not a programmer myself. I'm more a cultural anthropologist that was fascinated with creative coding as a culture, as a maker culture. And I did research during my master's onto these practices. And then after, yeah, I found out actually that you could see that a lot of this online ideology around open source software culture is used to organize people offline. And within the field of creative coding, it meant that, so you had these online fora, but in every city, meetups started happening. So you had Creative Coding Amsterdam, and what you saw happening at these meetups is that this whole ideology of sharing knowledge together, non-hierarchies, very open and accessible to everyone who is interested. That was the thing that sparked my interest, and I thought, well, okay, let's start an organization in Utrecht where there's an art school as well, and there's a university and a lot of creative people, but there's nothing for makers who are graduated. So I started Creative Coding Utrecht as a meetup, and immediately a lot of people came, and from there things got out of hand because I was already quite experienced in fundraising. So I started with a meetup, then an exhibition and a workshop, and now 5 years later we have a whole year program and we're becoming an institute. So yeah, it's nice.
But then, Francisco, you are obviously creative coding. How did you get in touch with creative coding for the first time, and what role does it play in your work? I was wondering.
I think I got into creative coding the first time I coded ever, which was when I was 7 years old, around, and someone showed me how to use Quick Basic. And ever since then, I never had really a formal education into creative coding, and everything that I know came from open sources and like these kinds of organizations and meetups that help share the knowledge and help spread it. And it's very good that these are also the people behind the tools that we use, and all the tools are, not all the tools, but a lot of tools are open and well documented by the community, and there's a lot of forums and discussions, and you can always find information, people willing to help. So I would say like my contact with it was from very young, and was also someone kind of passing the torch forward. It was like my older cousin who was like, look, you can teach a computer to do these kinds of things and to make things for you. And I actually think I cried when I first made my first program, because I was like, well, it's a piece of rock that we can make think, and it's kind of powerful. And yeah, from there, when I came here to the study, I of course started studying it more and advancing my skills, kind of, because I had something that I wanted to do, and there was already like thousands of tutorials online of how to do similar things, and you kind of just navigate the space, navigate the internet or people, meetups, and find what kinds of tools, what you can use to connect different kinds of media, different kinds of data together, and create some result out of it. So it's always been a collaborative process, actually. I wouldn't be able to do what I do now without people sharing knowledge on the internet or directly for free, and because they want others to know about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great community for learning and sharing, for sure.
Yeah, and actually, to come back to your previous question, I did start coding because I was thinking like I have to practice what I preach. So indeed, one of our community members, Timo Hoogland, he made this live coding platform called Mercury, which enables you to make music through live coding, and it's a pretty simple software. And I did start live coding. So yeah. It's
interesting now because there's this barrier. There has always been a big tech barrier for getting into programming, but now we are seeing like accessibility and democratization of these tools becoming more frequent, and we see people designing tools that are very easy to use even by children or people who have no contact with technology. So you see forms of programming, forms of coding that are more visual, and you can literally connect things together instead of writing some syntax that is very abstract. And that makes it much more accessible and open for people who are not a bunch of nerds, basically. So things like this, like generative music that you can do with these concepts of programming. These are all things being translated now into nice and easy to use tools, which I think is great. It's just gonna spread the power of using these tools to more people.
Yeah, I think that's live coding. We were pushing live coding a lot because it has this performative aspect, and if you curate it, well, in the form of an algorithm where it should be danceable, then a lot of people, it's still weird, of course, it's still weird experimental music, but for some people they have a hook because it's familiar and they can dance to it, and then they visit these things and they go away absolutely amazed, like, oh, I don't know what this was, but it was amazing. And that's, and by also showcasing the code as well as also your instrument and improvisation tool, it takes away the first barrier with showing the code itself. And that's nice, you know, that's like a kind of an introduction to get a bit away the magic from coding, that really it's a craft.
Exposing the dirty back end, kind of dirty.
Yeah, and I think
dirty
that's also what I like about your installation. That you also try to show like the hardware in the end. Could you elaborate a bit more on this? On the motivation.
Yeah. So I had a few options to go with. I could make it very neat and hide everything, but I also believe that by exposing the technology, you raise questions in people's heads, and they might start thinking critically about it. So in my work, maybe you cannot see very clearly in the image, but most of the wires are completely exposed, and you see the connections and the computers behind the work. You can peek behind like this. And that's for people to realize, look, there's technology that we use to control our banks, there's technology that we use to control our planes, and they're dominated now by huge corporations with a lot of money, but we can use these technologies for ourselves, for creation, for sharing, for expression. So I want to show all these, this aspect of it as well. The same technology that is used to trigger bombs is I'm using here to take down the mask. So
And in Brazil, it's still voting by computer, right?
in Brazil, we use electronic voting system. Yeah, it's kind of a hybrid. It's not connected to the internet, and it's, from my understanding, it's safe. There hasn't been an instance of voting fraud, but we use electronic voting system. It's also interesting because it's a participatory process where the institution, the governmental institution that takes care of the voting systems, are also inviting the community, and anyone who wants to sign up for it, they can go there and they open the machine, they show you the hardware, they explain how the electronics work, they show you 80% of the source code. So they try to make the technology also transparent because it's such an important thing in our democracy. So yeah, electronic voting, but they try to make it transparent and open in a way that people can share. It's kind of like white hat hackers. It's hackers that are trying to break a system so they can make it better and improve and more safe for people to use with confidence.
Could you explain how your installation represents, like specifically tied to like the Brazilian political sphere? Or like feeling.
Yeah, so it's interesting to translate these political visions into an artwork. And the main vision that I have here, we have in Brazil we have the left wing, we have the right wing, and we have the center. The center is huge. It's like 75% of all the people. And if you compare one to the other of these politicians, they're very much the same. They're kind of just, they're like a fluid that just fits into whatever container they go in. And that's what I wanted to represent with the projections on the statues. The statues are rigid and they don't change, and they're all the same, but these projections change the aspect of this politician a bit. And that also changes how people choose them and how they vote. So I'm trying to show the fluidity of it, and how that's captured into a rigid structure that we have to break vote by vote, like dropping water on a rock.
To me, also the projection on those faces, they have a kind of an eerie feeling to me. Is that deliberately chosen?
Yeah. So their most natural state is at, let's say, 50%. They're neutral, but at the extremes they start getting very creepy. And that's to show the corruption, the distortion in political thoughts and in the political positioning. I try to show that visually. They get more corrupted as they get more votes, as they get more power, or as they get less votes, when they're less recognized, they are also getting more corrupted. Yeah, corrupted in image in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see, there's a few smiling, and the rest, most of the others are like neutral or angry. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about, like, if you look at our political landscape, there's now this enormous fragmentation happening, that there's so many like new parties that are one issue parties, and that actually you can stand for a kind of an issue and people can vote on it, but that there's a lot of criticism in the Netherlands that because we have this polder way of working together, meaning that, okay, you have a party, but in the end it's a coalition that has to make the new framework of governance. Yeah. And then in the end, they always have to come back to a kind of inner coalition agreement.
Yeah, consensus kind of thing.
Consensus that, and then basically the criticism is that you as a voter can have your principle, but if that one is getting into power, basically your whole ideas where this politician stands for will be mildly embedded in the governance. Mm-hmm. So then that is also a kind of a crisis within within the democratic system here. And I was wondering, like, how does that relate? I get this feeling that here it's also about a lot of attention that you can get that is more important, right? To position yourself in the Brazilian. Is that?
I think it's very, very important aspect for me in the work that is the participation aspect, that you feel that you have power to influence the destination or the history, the path that things are going to take. And one thing that I was thinking about what you said is you're talking about how the political system is in the Netherlands, and I try to show a bit an aspect of the political system in Brazil. But one thing, I don't know, I wanted to counter your question with another question, is asking how do you see politics going further, like hand to hand with technology? Is there something like direct participation possible? Can people be more involved? Would that work? Is that something that is interesting to look at?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and of course I can answer that a little bit. Because I was really thinking. Actually, here it seems like that politicians should represent a kind of an idea, but basically the politicians should represent the voters in that sense. So it's kind of seems like an inversion. But anyway, what we try to do as one of our projects is let's say in governance, and specifically if we talk about city governance, their data or big data is becoming more and more important, because there's this transition into smart city, which is also a kind of a huge concept. Yeah. But anyway, data-driven processes are a really important element in that. And what we try to do is demystify these processes. So we go very, very local around the topic, such as waste. And we organized a workshop around waste, or how we could imagine the future city with a zero waste imaginary. So we were looking at, okay, what data sets are already available around a specific neighborhood where we would do a workshop. And it was, to me also personally, it was very interesting, because then you see governments, they say, we have all these open data sets, and then you can have this platform online, and then they have all these topics, and then you can download an Excel sheet, and in there are all numbers. It doesn't say anything. But when you start translating those kind of numbers into a map, if there's geographical data, then you immediately see, okay, this data around air quality is gathered on these and these and these points in the city. Then it immediately, like without any knowledge of technology at all, you immediately get questions, because why is the data only gathered here? Why? And what was interesting, I did this at our workspace, and this is a former industrial area, and we had a data set about the amount of trash bins. And then you saw that in our area there were no trash bins at all, or maybe 2. And then in the surrounding residential areas there was a lot of trash bins. So it implied a little bit that, okay, this is a works area, so there are no people outside. They also didn't track any air quality data inside our neighborhood, but in the residential area as well. So then you immediately wonder, why is that? Is a industrial area not valid for air quality measurement? We are working there, so I think it's also important. And then we give people, then we start doing a workshop where we start gathering our own data. And in that sense, you could make an argument by using, so you gather data around air quality or whatever your interest is, and then you can build an argument on top of the data that is governmental data, and that's a way how we show how you could use, well, digital processes as a way as an activist practice. Yeah. Not necessarily to show. Of course, you need to be aware about all the privacy stuff, but we try to empower people that you can also make your own data, and then by showing like what data actually is, and having a discussion like what does data mean for you, it's a very interesting discussion, and it's interesting to see that people are saying like, you have a lot of citizen science projects, and we put that next to a governmental data set, and then people say, but that's not real data, it's citizen science data, it's not real, and the government is true. So it says a little bit about how the Netherlands, how the Dutch residents see their government. I would say, well, now it's a bit, I would say in general, we are very trustworthy of our government, although they made really huge fuck-ups the last years with, I think they,
Francisco made a beautiful remark where you actually said, like, in between things, but you said that when you were a child, you could teach a computer, you learned that you can teach a computer something. And I think that's also something that maybe with our trust that has to do with that, is that we don't believe as individual citizens that we can actually teach computers to do something, so we can sort of inform ourselves more about issues like waste, to get more informed and not to only have to look at sort of the people who make the translation from the data to governance. So I think that's sort of like a thing I wanted to connect from what you were saying, because the teaching aspect, instead of learning from a computer, is something that is also a form of empowerment as an individual, and I think that really shows in your approach with creative coding Utrecht, but also in the way that you present yourself and your work. That it's not about the technology; it's more about the surrounding context.
How it's used.
To wrap up, but
okay.
The last remark is I don't want to have the last word this time. So if you don't have anything to add.
Yeah, I think it's all about technology, but not. It's how it's used, by who, at who, and for who makes it, who makes the decisions and the choices, and that maybe those decision makers should be more the people, more us. We should have more control over that. And I think that's a beautiful thing that you do also with teaching people about data, the importance of it, and how they can gather it themselves and make use of it.
Yeah, and I think we need more digital artists like you to show like that the other, more the beauty or more the storytelling or the expressive power of technology.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, we will get there when we teach everybody to learn how to do it.
Yeah. Right.
Thanks.